Welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. I'm Jan Johnson, a seasoned believer who loves relationships and, just talking about Jesus. Here you'll hear inspiring stories from a woman who went from using meth to starting a ministry in Kenya, or the man who had a life-changing encounter with someone in Home Depot, of all places, or a woman who has endured years of chronic pain after having her gallbladder, spleen, and pancreas removed. Every conversation goes deep into how God has changed lives and brought us to a place of surrender, sharing joys, sorrows, and just life in general. We don't have to go it alone because we can go hand in hand with Jesus on our journey. Jesus desires a relationship with us, with you. He wants to know us intimately. Revelations 12:11 says, "And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." That's what I'm talking about. The word of our testimony, just talking about Jesus. Join us each week.
So then he asked me a question that is funny and sad, but he asked me, "Do you love me more than you love the Denver Broncos?" And of course, in my mind, I'm like, of course I love, but before I could really even get the thought out, before I could say, of course I love you more than the Denver Broncos, like that should be a very easy thing to say. I thought about it, and I had just spent 3 hours watching my team on TV, and I do every single Sunday. I had never in my life spent 3 hours praying and talking to God in my whole life. I had never spent 3 hours in worship or reading the Bible in my whole life. I had never spent 3 straight hours with God, yet every Sunday, I was spending 3 hours with God.
Welcome, my friends, to episode 61 of Just Talking About Jesus. Last week, we heard from Natasha Smith, who lost multiple family members and shared how God has taken her through each of those losses, listening to her questions, wrapping his arms around her, and turning ashes to beauty. So you're going through life, living the American dream. Everything is peachy. You have a fantastic wife and kids living in a beautiful home in Colorado. You've successfully built several businesses. Your health is good. Just going through day to day with your routine. And then, whammy, God asked you the question you weren't expecting. The one that shook you to your core. Listen as my guest, George Sisneros, reveals the question and tells his compelling story. George Sisneros, welcome to Just Talking About Jesus. Boy, you are an adventurer. You do all kinds of adventures. What are a few things you like to do?
Oh my gosh, I have done a lot of adventure. I've run a marathon and jumped out of an airplane. I even paid $100 once to wrestle an alligator, which was kind of goofy. That was over a decade ago. So what do I like to do now? I really just like to experience life. I don't, less being at home, but doing things with my wife. So we've traveled around the world. We've traveled to Cuba. Our favorite city is New York City. We've only been there a few times, but we love it. As a matter of fact, in July, I have a trip set with my sons to climb a high Colorado mountain lake and camp out overnight, which is a lot of fun. But my wife and I have climbed volcanoes here in Guatemala, the third highest volcano or peak in Central America. Spent the night in the crater. It's a dormant volcano, but
It's dormant.
We just mostly dormant.
Yeah, volcano.
So we like to savor life.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome. So you are doing some missions now. What made you jump? What were you doing first, and then what made you jump into doing that?
Well, I never thought about or planned to be a missionary or do missions work in any way, shape, or form. My wife grew up as a strong believer who always wanted to do missions. She had gone on all kinds of different missions trips, short-term trips to Honduras and just other places throughout the world. And when we were married, I owned my own businesses. I had a couple of small businesses. They were doing really well. We were making, six figures. I wasn't working that hard, to be honest, maybe 35 hours a week. We were living a really good life. We had a beautiful home and 4 kids and really living the American dream. Our church had an opportunity. Somebody canceled. And so there was this extra space to go on a trip to Guatemala. And so I thought, I'm going to go on that trip. And my wife wasn't able to go, but I was able to go on that trip. It was just a week. And really, it was on that trip that I realized that God was calling me and my wife to leave what we had and to serve him. It kind of starts, I'll back up one step because this previous step is really kind of the catalyst of everything. And that step happened in, I think it was the end of 2010. I was at home in Colorado. We're from the United States. We're from Colorado. And I was watching the Denver Broncos on TV. I remember I was in my basement and the game was over. And I just remember sitting there kind of in silence. And I felt the Holy Spirit asking me, or felt God asking me if I loved him. And it was just kind of a weird question. And I'm like, yeah, of course. In my mind, I'm like, of course, I love you. And then I felt him ask.
Question.
Well, yeah, it did. It's funny because as I look back, it did feel that way because then he asked me, "Do you love me more than you love your wife?" And I thought about it, and I see my wife every day. I see her physically. We have coffee together. We pray together. We eat together. All the stuff. We travel and experience life together. And I thought about it. I'm like, I love my wife more, which is very humbling, right? And really, what am I going to do? I'm not going to lie to God. Like I had to be honest with myself.
Who actually already knows.
Yeah. And then he asked, and so really, and that's actually a good point because he was really, I mean, he knew, he was just pointing some things out to me. And so then he asked me if I loved him more than I loved my kids. And anybody that has kids will tell you, we now have 9. And if one of my kids needed a heart transplant and I was the only possible donor, I would give them my heart. I love my kids. I would die for my kids. And so I said, I love my kids. It was easier off the tongue. I love my kids more than I love you. But then then he asked me a question that is funny and sad, but he asked me, "Do you love me more than you love the Denver Broncos?" And of course, in my mind, I'm like, of course I love, but before I could really even get the thought out, before I could say, of course I love you more than the Denver Broncos, like that should be a very easy thing to say. I thought about it and I had just spent 3 hours watching my team on TV, and I do every single Sunday. I had never in my life spent 3 hours praying and talking to God in my whole life. I had never spent 3 hours in worship or reading the Bible in my whole life. I had never spent 3 straight hours with God, yet every Sunday I was spending 3 hours with God. And so it really convicted me. And honestly, it made me think in my heart, do I even love God? Like, do I even love him? Because here's the thing. It's easy to say that you love God. It's easy to say that you're a Christian and profess your love for him. But it is a whole other thing to live that way. So that night, I'm laying in bed with my wife, and I'm telling her, "Listen, this is what happened, and just in my heart and in my spirit, I felt these questions, and these were my answers." And I told her, I said, I'm going to stop praying, and so I'm going to stop praying for an entire year, and I'm going to trade all those prayers for a 3-word prayer. For an entire year, I'm just going to pray, "I love you." Like I wanted to be in love with the Lord. I didn't even know what that meant completely, but I definitely wanted to love him more than my wife and my kids. Like that's what we're called to do. Those are the 2 greatest commandments. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so for an entire year, I love you. And it was a year later that spot opened up, almost to the day, weirdly. November of 2011, that spot opened up. I went on this missions trip. Nothing special. I didn't feel like God was telling me to go on this mission trip. It opened up, and so I went. We were at an orphanage, and at the end of that trip, we went to a feeding center at a church. It was a cafeteria, and the room was filled with young kids, probably 5 to 12, 13 years old, 15 maybe, 200 kids. And I can picture the scene. I can hear the kids talking, not real loud, but just there was just a room filled with people talking. And then the worship team started up and they started singing and playing, and every kid in the room just stood up. This is in Guatemala City, Zone 6. Now I know, like, poor kids live there. They're all standing up, they're raising their hands in the air, and they're just so happy. And I could feel their love for God. And I'm at the back of the room and I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, that's love. They love God. And it was on that day that I realized and recognized I love God. For the first time in my life, I was 45 years old. I love God. And God grabbed me by the heart that day. And again, I hadn't heard from him really in a year since that time in the basement. And he said, okay, I want you. I want all of you. I don't want you on weekends. I want you. And to me, that meant that he wanted me to serve him with my life. And really, that's what a believer is called to do, is to give up their life, like to deny themselves, to take up their cross and follow him. That's what the word says, but do we know what that means? And so I said, okay. And to me, that meant coming to Guatemala. So I got home. Again, my wife wasn't with me. I remember the day perfectly because when you remember those impactful events in your life, I remember walking up the steps. We lived in Colorado. It had just snowed. I remember that it had just snowed because I remember the kind of the crunchy sound of snow under my feet. And I went inside. My wife's waiting for me. It's like 11 at night, late night flight. And we talked for a little while, went to bed. We're laying in bed. And I remember we're laying there and I'm holding her hand. So we're laying side by side and I'm holding her hand and I'm telling her about everything that's been going on. And in my head, just kind of like, what is she going to say about this? And
Exactly.
I had a deal with God, and the deal was like, I'm in, but you gotta talk to her. And so I'm laying there and I'm telling her, and then I told her, what I felt God was calling us to do. And remember, we were living a very good life. We were debt free. We had a very strong marriage. We had 4 kids, like literally living our best life. And I told her, and she literally, it was quiet for, I don't know, it felt like a bit, but it was 3 or 4 seconds. And she said one word, and she said, "Okay." That was December, first week of December. Christmas obviously is coming up, New Year's. And so we thought, okay, we made that decision that night, Jan. And we said, all right, we're putting our house on the market first week of January because we wanted to get through the holidays. We put our house on the market. 7 months later, from the day I returned back, we had sold our home, our businesses, all the kids' toys, and we were landing in Guatemala City.
Wow. Wow.
So that's how it happened.
I know, but isn't that just how, the time when you can be a Christian for how long, and then all of a sudden something just like whomp. And it's just
Yeah.
like, it's just such a Holy Spirit moment that you're overcome with, yeah, what does that really mean? And what is my responsibility? And what am I going to do with that? And yeah, my whole time I'm thinking, and what is God telling your wife?
Absolutely.
Because, yeah, as you know, it's kind of a moment like, I don't know if you watched The Chosen, but where the Nicodemus is trying to make a decision and kind of wants to go with Jesus, but it's like too much to give it all up and to, you know?
That's really the whole point of the rich young ruler is that it's not the money, it's that the money was his God. The money ruled him. He couldn't give it up. And God took us literally at the pinnacle. We had never we never made so much money with, such little effort. And I'm not going to say it was easy, but such little effort. We were debt free. We had gotten out of debt within the last couple of years. I mean, he literally took us from the best we'd ever been ever. And it's like, I mean, that's the moment he used to say, follow me. And interestingly, we didn't pray about it, which is a weird thing, because I think as Christians, we're like, oh, well, I got to pray about this decision. And, it was years later. For a couple of years, I felt bad about that. Here we are in Guatemala. We were just kind of taking the next step and just following the stones that he had put out for us to just walk across. And a couple of years later, I'm like, I had this kind of pain in my heart, like not in any way like, did we make the right decision? I just felt like as a Christian, we should have prayed about it. And I remember being out in the living room and reading the Bible. And I remember reading specifically, it was just so beautiful because God knew my pain and what that meant to me. And he just gave me this scripture. And it's like he's calling Peter. He says, drop your nets and follow me, and I'll make you a fisher of men. And you know what Peter didn't do? He didn't pray about it. You know what he did? He dropped his nets and he followed him. And it just gave me so much relief that it's okay. Because I think as Christians, sometimes I think we use prayer as a stalling tactic. Now, listen, I'm all for praying, and trust me,
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
pray like every time I write my Bible study, I pray that God would give me the words. And so I think it's important. Of course, it's important to pray. But that being said, be careful because I believe in my case and in my life, in our life, that because we were moving, God was able to move us and direct us. It's very hard to move or to direct a parked car. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So I just finished writing a Bible study and it's called Discovering Your Journey. And so the gist of it is, mapping out your life because of this happened, resulting in, and then comparing that to the lives of Ruth, Jonah, David, and Joseph. But as I'm doing it with my own Bible study group right now, just kind of playing it out, seeing how it goes. But the thing is, especially like you're looking at David, you're looking at Joseph particularly, what were the things that God used in his life to get him to be where he was?
yeah.
I mean, and so I want to ask you, what were the things in building your businesses and doing the availability of funds to do what you wanted? What were those type of things that you've brought to your new mission life? Those
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
good, that because you were there, now you can successfully be here. What kind of types of things?
Listen, I fully, completely believe that everything that it's really Romans 8:28, and God can use anything for his glory and all of our circumstances. And when you get to be my age, you've gone through a lot of stuff and a lot of really hard stuff. And how is God going to use that in my life? Well, he has. My first, year of marriage was brutal. It was very hard. And then the next 6 years were also super duper hard. And so God took us through that fire, and thank the Lord because I'm madly in love now. But he took us through that fire to strengthen us to be able to be in a place that we could take this mission and to come here. We were 40 some $1,000s in debt a couple of years before we came to Guatemala. And for whatever reason, we just decided, you know what, we are going to get out of debt. We weren't at all thinking about our future and future missions, being on the field in any way, shape, or form. But it was just, I think we just got tired of it, and we got tired of the wait. But God used that time because I don't believe it would have made any sense for us to go onto the field with any kind of debt. Well, we had like $45,000 worth of debt. So we made this decision. Again, it's just this is, something in our lives. We make a decision. It's like, okay, let's do this for a year. So we decided to take an entire year off of spending money. So that meant no gifts for Christmas or birthdays. That meant no going out to dinner, fast food. That other than the necessities of, groceries to cook at home, to utilities and mortgage and that the basics. And we were out of debt. I think it took us 14 months to get completely out of debt. And so God used that time. We didn't had no idea. He was preparing us to go on to the field. And because I think a lot of missionaries, I short term, maybe longer term, I think a lot of them come because they feel like they can fix their marriage if they're focusing and serving God, or they come and they're like, well, I don't like my job. I want to do something different. And so, let's try to do missions. And this way I don't have to, work a job, blah, blah, blah. Well, let me tell you, I've never worked harder in my entire life. Like I put more hours into this ministry. But the interesting thing about it is that I I I love it. Like I work late, I work long hours, and I just absolutely love what I do. So, I mean, it literally, if you go back to, college, I studied journalism and I ended up not becoming a journalist, but I learned to write and to communicate. And I never used that before I got onto the field. And as a missionary, I can tell you that's one of the unsexy parts about being a missionary is just the communication with supporters, telling the story of what God is doing in the ministry. So the entire way throughout my entire life, God has been preparing me to do the work that we're doing now.
I think that's true. There's so many things, and especially if you really start to look back and say, oh, because I knew how to do this, I did this and came to that. It's just like, yeah, so much. And even the pain points, he uses our pain points, either to share with somebody else or minister to somebody else, or just to build us up and to know that we can trust him through it, the other side of it.
Absolutely.
Through there. Yeah. So tell us about what your day to day is like. What are the things that you've started, and uh, just tell us about that.
Wow, this ministry has gone through so much transition. I think when we got here, we were on a need to know basis. God said, "Okay, get to Guatemala." We got to Guatemala, and the plans that we had to work with another ministry just weren't coming together. So I really felt again the Lord just directing our steps. And so my kids went to a missionary kids school here in Guatemala. My wife volunteered there. And I stayed at home and I didn't go out and feed people. I didn't build houses. I didn't do all of the stuff that I think a lot of people think of as missionary work. What I felt God calling me to do was to learn the language, to learn Spanish because we didn't know it, and to spend time in the Word, like to continue to build on that relationship, that kind of a new relationship. I'd just fallen in love with God. And so to build that relationship. So I did that for probably 6 to 9 months. From there, we found a small village in the mountains, and that there was no missionary presence. We started an after school program for boys. We didn't even know why. Again, just kind of felt that that was the leading of the Lord that we started this elementary program. After I think it was about 3 or 4 years, we decided, they're a little bit young to really fully grasp, the significance of the gospel. And not that they can't, but we felt like we would maybe have more opportunity to teach a bit older boys to really grab a hold of what it meant to follow Jesus and to know him and really to accept his invitation of salvation. And so we actually founded a private middle school. We only have 30, 35 kids that come to the school. It's a small village. So my day to day is that I get up early, read the Bible, pray, prepare for my day. And when I say early, I generally am up at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm preparing for the Bible study that day. We are going through basically a chapter a day. We started in Luke. We then went to Acts, and we're now in Romans. And we're just every day, I'm teaching a chapter of the Bible we're going through. So I prepare for that, but then I teach that. And it's about an hour long lesson. It's pretty deep, and it's where my heart is. I absolutely love it. So that I do that. I also prepare. It takes a little bit longer for this preparation, but I also teach a Bible study on Wednesday nights to the community. And so right now we're in Galatians, and Galatians is very dense, a lot like Romans. And so it just takes a lot of preparation. We go verse by verse and we cover a chapter in a night, and it is pretty intense, but I also love that. And then my my heart really is in the Bible study that I write. So currently I'm in the book of Acts, chapter 22, and I go line by line. It's like a commentary, but I think commentaries can be hard to read. It's an easy to read and understand commentary is the best way I can explain it. Generally, it takes 2 to 3. It's taken as many as 5 newsletters to cover one chapter. I try to keep it to 1 or 2 if I possibly can, but it almost always takes 2 or 3. For example, chapter 22 is going to take 2. The last chapter I think it took 3. And so that's the depth that I go into it. So if it takes 4 newsletters to go through a chapter, that's a month. I only send them out once a week. They're pretty beefy. Like my newsletters are about 2,000 words, which is quite a bit. It's grown a lot. It took 14 months to grow to 1,000 subscribers. And then it took 5 weeks or 6 weeks to grow to 2,000. And then we're currently at 20, probably this week we'll hit 2,500 subscribers. And the crazy thing about that is, as you know, you've got a newsletter, the open rate is extremely high. It's like a 67% open rate, which is unheard of, really. Generally, it's like 25%, 20%. And so the people that are getting it, it's a lot to read, but they clearly love it because they continue to open it, and it's really starting to grab some feet and grow. So I spend a lot of time. I probably spend 10 to 15 hours preparing and writing, so studying and researching and writing for that newsletter. Obviously we need to raise money, so just to pay our teachers and to run this program and to do everything that we do. I spend time doing that, and that's more missionary work that most people don't think about and don't think of, like, oh, go be a missionary and raise money. I mean, it's just so those are some of the things. We've got a feeding program. We have a medical program. We have a widows program where we've adopted 8 widows from our community, and we just take care of them. We love them. We help them with their medical needs. We deliver food once a month, and just those types of things. Of course, we pray over them. And so those are some of the things that I do day to day and some of the things that the ministry does.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And, when you talk about what you're doing with your Bible study and a newsletter, I mean, look at how God can use us, thanks to the internet, but for way more impact than you ever could have imagined, just to be able to, rather than, with one-on-one. Okay, so here's a question then. This is something I think about all the time is, what are the gifts that God's given you, or your bents or your spiritual gifts? How do you see those playing out in what you're doing now?
Well, it's so interesting because I was a horrible student in school. I graduated by the hair of my chinny chin chin. I just barely got through. I wasn't able to go to the university that I dreamed about, which is funny that I would even dream to go to college. So I entered into a lower tiered college. And then after a year, I transferred to Colorado State University, which is my uniform. I wear it every day. So I transferred there, but I was still, I mean, all along the way, I was a horrible student. I just didn't enjoy the learning process, and I wanted to party and have fun. And that was probably the reason I wanted to go to that school. And so it's interesting how, here I am in a village in Guatemala, and I've founded, and am a big part of running this school, which is crazy. So, what gifts has he given me? I think the biggest gift God has given me is really just to teach, my compassion to teach people about him. I mean, man, I have this incredible heart for men specifically. And I'll tell you why, because I think most churches, if you go into most churches and you take a look around, you're going to find a majority, whatever that number is, whatever that percentage is, a majority of women. And I think that men have dropped the ball in a lot of cases. And I think that men need to stand up. I think they need to, read the Bible first and foremost. I think that's really where for me, I think that's where all the change happens. I think it's important to pray, of course. I think it's important to go to church, absolutely. But if you're praying and going to church and you're not reading the Bible, there's a really good chance that you're a weak Christian man. That's my opinion. I think it's made all the difference in my life. So I'm a massive advocate for reading the Bible, studying the Bible, not just reading it to check it off a list, but studying the Bible, going deep and, asking the Holy Spirit who inspired the authors every word, asking him to just be with you and guide you through it. Because wow, if I could get across to, again, speaking to men, anybody, of course, but if I could get across to men what is waiting for them on the other end of that book as they go through that book and begin to understand the heart of a Paul, or to begin to understand the faith of a Joseph, or God's plan for someone, like Jacob, it like their lives would be transformed. Unfortunately, I think that because I was born in the States, I just kind of felt like, oh, I'm a Christian. My parents started, we went to school, and so I just didn't really think it was important for me to go any deeper than I already was. I really thought that my faith was all about me and my salvation and following these rules to be the best person that I could, to somehow gain favor and hopefully at the end get to heaven. Like that was my crazy thinking back in the day. And I think there's a lot of people, but specifically young men and even husbands and men, who just do not understand that it has nothing to do with us. We are all sinners. We all fall short. And that when we put our faith in him, everything changes, because as soon as we truly put our faith in him with our heart, so going from the mind, knowing who Jesus is, to the heart of, I love him, I understand that I love him, and I love him, at least in the beginning, I love him with all the heart that I can put into it. Because when we love him, we're then filled with the Holy Spirit. We're promised. Jesus says, it's better that I go, that I'll send the counselor. He sends someone to be with us. And so, gosh, if I could meet with one man at a time and just grab them by the shoulders, and, if you knew what I know, and that's what I feel that I'm doing. And I think that that's what God has prepared me to do over all these years. So my spiritual gifting is just an absolute passion for men, everyone, but men specifically. Because if we can get men to finally, in a lot of cases, step up and lead their family, not in this domineering way, but in this loving way, as we're called to in the Bible. A woman biblically is supposed to submit to a man. And I think a lot of men look at that as like, oh, well, you need to submit to me. But the reality is that we're supposed to love our wives as Jesus loved the church. Well, if you don't have to scratch below the surface much to recognize and realize, how did he love the church? What did he do for the church? He died for the church. So as men, are we willing to die for our wives? And for their part, are they willing to be someone worth dying for? So there's a lot to unpack there. And I have so much, when we start talking about, men leading families, I just get kind of worked up and passionate about it.
Well, and even if you're working with your middle school boys, that's where to start. Right there,
Absolutely.
training them up to be the fathers and husbands that they should be, you know, that because
Absolutely.
there are some cultural things that you have to work around, and kind of dissolve and maybe show a different way, a better way
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
doing that too. So yeah, there's some of that. So you adopted some kids. Tell me about that. I have some adopted kids.
Wow. We did. My daughter, who came to Guatemala with us, when she was in her teens, she started volunteering at an orphanage that was nearby where we lived. And she would come home and talk about this little girl, and she'd say, "Oh, she was born deaf, and she's at this orphanage, and I love her so much," and just really had a lot of compassion for her. And so she would talk to us about her. And at some point, my wife also went to with my daughter to do some volunteering. And what my wife was volunteering for was to help this little girl get to speech therapy, because she had a cochlear implant put in. And so this little girl, as it turns out, had an older brother. I don't remember their ages at the time, but I want to say like 6 or 7. So they were a year apart. So 6 to 7, 7 or 8, something like that. And so they became adoptable. It took a little while. Weirdly, they're both Guatemalan, but he was born in Mexico because his parents happened to be in Mexico at the time. Well, the way it works is you're a Mexican citizen. So there was a long process to get them to become adoptable. And so while we were in process of adopting them, so first of all, to adopt, you have to be a permanent resident of Guatemala, which the Lord had prepared for us. We were permanent residents. We're still American citizens, but we're permanent residents of Guatemala. We had thought about adopting, but never really, we want to be prepared to adopt, but we weren't thinking about it. So we had gone through the process of being qualified to adopt. So to become residents took about a year and a half. To be able to adopt took about another year. And then somewhere along the line, we met these kids. They eventually became adoptable. So this is this long process. So once we start the process to adopt them, and we could only adopt them because she had special need and because they were older. Normally in Guatemala, you can't know the kids that you're adopting, but they were a special case scenario. And so we were in process. And while we were in process, turns out they had two younger siblings in another orphanage that they had found. They moved them over to the same orphanage. And the way the law works in Guatemala, which is a really good law, is that you have to adopt, you can't separate siblings. And so we get a call from the director of the orphanage, and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you guys know that we found these two siblings. And so we're kind of in a situation right now where you can adopt all four or none." And so
You're
we
expecting
said,
quadruplets.
yeah, yeah, no, and let me just tell you, it was like that. So we ended up adopting all four, and we said yes immediately. Like that day, we said absolutely, we will adopt all four. We didn't. These two other kids were complete strangers to us because we had spent a lot of time with the other two. I remember her sending a picture, and I can think of that picture, and I'm like, they just look like two random kids. But because we loved those two so much, and we were just trusting. Listen, if God would have come to us and said, "Hey, would you adopt these four?" We said, "Not going to happen." There's no way we would have adopted four. It's just a but now it was an easy yes. And that's God continues to just do that in our lives where it's just like, let me just show you this piece. And then I'm going to show you this piece and this piece. And then at some point he turns the light on and we're like, oh, wow, okay, I get it. So we adopted those four. And then 3 years later, I think it was, we got a call from the orphanage and they said, "Hey, there's another sibling who is younger." So when we adopted them, their mom was pregnant. Their mom is an alcoholic. Dad is a really bad guy. Not going to get into that. And so at court, when they had to turn over their rights to allow these kids to be adopted, even though they had abandoned them already, they had already been abandoned and in an orphanage. She was pregnant at the time. Well, it was that baby that 3 years later showed up at an orphanage. And so they asked us if we would be open to adopting their sibling. And again, I can picture where we were right outside our gate here. We get this call and we just said yes. But we muted the call and I looked at my wife and she's like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we get back on and we're like, "Okay, yes, let us know what we need to do next." That process was a lot quicker, and that's how we went from 4 to 8 to 9. So 9 kids. We're done.
You think. You say.
Yeah. I should be more careful when I say that, but no, I do feel like I think we're good, but we'll see.
Yeah, when I had number 10, I said, "No, I think I'm good." Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yep.
But there's always that side of who am I saying no to then?
Yeah. I say it with caution. I say it with caution.
So, what would you say to listeners who just feel some kind of nudge? Where would they start? What should they do? Yeah.
As far as like doing missions work,
Yeah, doing missions and yeah.
yeah, I would recommend to them what I recommended to my kids. My son specifically wanted, they wanted to do some type of missions work. So the first thing they did was they went to a Bible school, a good Bible school. Then they went to a different one. So they've been to two Bible schools. And my younger son wants to be a missionary in an unreached country. So I think that, and then my older son is currently in an internship with his church to, he wants to plant churches in a foreign country. So those two, I think you, first of all, in my opinion, have to be, I think it's smart to just get much more biblically sound than probably most people are. We came onto the field and I wouldn't say that we were super biblically prepared. By the grace of God, He has, prepared us over the years. But so that's probably the most important thing is prepare yourself biblically. I think that if you're going to come with a spouse or as a family, I think that you have to be debt free. I know that that's kind of a worldly qualification, but it doesn't make, if you can't manage your finances in the States or wherever you are, there's no way you're going to be able to manage the finances of a growing ministry and when it's growing in a way that God wants to grow it. And so I would say have your finances in order. And then maybe, well, more importantly than even that is to have your marriage in order if you're going to come with a family. My wife and I were incredibly solid. We had a super strong marriage and you will need it. You will be tested. It's not a matter of will you be tested. You will be tested multiple times over and over again. And so if you are I've seen it. I've seen missionaries come onto the field trying to fix their marriage, and that is a really bad idea. And they all go home within a year or two. I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but I can't think of a missionary who has come onto the field and fixed anything on the field. So listen, we're all human, obviously. We've all got challenges. So all I'm saying is, try to have some of those bigger issues under control, if not completely under control, because you're gonna missions work is I think it looks very romantic from the outside. It's like, oh, he's a missionary, and wow, look at the school that they have founded, and they've got all these programs. We're now working in Cuba, and you look at, I think from the outside, it probably looks just really like a great story and romantic and all of that, but it has taken a lot of struggle and a lot of tears. And so we are fortunate. We feel incredibly grateful to the Lord where we are right now. We do feel like we are on a very firm ground and that, for example, we recognize enemy attacks much more quickly than we did in the beginning. I'm not going to, that's a whole other podcast, but so we do feel, and I think that confidence comes really from our confidence in the Lord. And so the closer you get to God and the more you fall, deeper in love with Him, the more that spreads into the rest of your life. And I think that you can correlate kind of your, how you feel just foundationally day to day in life with how much time you're spending in the Word. I know that seems really simplistic, but I really believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. So all of that is just foundational. It's like
Yep.
get your foundation firm and then you're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to go to a country that speaks another language, I would also highly recommend that you have some sort of, maybe a 70%, kind of an understanding of that language. You don't have to be completely fluent, but I think that would have made a big difference for us coming here. It took a little while to kind of get that down, but you cannot, like, what are you going to do? Like, you can't pray, like, you can, but it's hard to share the gospel if you don't speak their language. It's hard to pray in their language obviously. Can you pray in your own language? Of course. And I still even do that sometimes periodically, but most of the time I speak in their language, and I, of course, 100% of the time teach. You can't, how are you going to share the gospel, you know? So
Mhm.
yeah, that's another thing I would
Yeah,
probably consider.
awesome. Where can people find you?
I am on social media. So I'm on Twitter, which is now X, under 1G Cisneros, but I'm also on Instagram's version of Twitter, which is Threads. And that's probably where I actually write every day, and I share. It's all about the Bible. It's all about my faith and ministry, and what God is doing. I break scripture down quite a bit. So you can look for me there also, 1G Cisneros on Threads. And I think the best place to find me, honestly, is just to subscribe to the newsletter. You can always just reply to any newsletter if you have any questions. If you want to just have a conversation, it's super easy to get a hold of me there. I see that most kind of brightly and most clearly. I'll see your messages coming in. So, and I really think this newsletter has been, I write this newsletter for myself, honestly, is because I'm learning, but I don't want to move on from a chapter until I understand the chapter. You're not going to understand it 100%, but I want to understand it in a way that I can explain it to someone in a simple way. And so those are probably the best places to find
Yeah,
me.
yeah. And you have a website.
We do. It's ordinarymissionaries.org.
Okay. And then if someone wanted to, they could donate there.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, before donating personally, I mean, I would just, you can subscribe to that newsletter, which is a different newsletter. And that just is basically, we send something out once a month that tells what's going on in the ministry, and generally it's a story of someone in the ministry, and how God is moving in their lives, and we just get to be a part of that and witness it. And so I share that. So yeah, I think that and then if you feel led by the Lord after, kind of getting comfortable with what we do, and how we're serving the Lord, and if you want to give, that would be great. But really, we just want people to kind of see what God is doing in Guatemala.
Great. Could you close with just one story?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I guess I probably another one of my big passions is Cuba. We've recently, within the last year and a half, started working with pastors in Cuba. And when we started working with them and visiting them, they live a completely different life. People have no idea. Honestly, I don't think most people have any idea what is going on in Cuba. And the country is riddled in witchcraft, a religion called Santeria, which is a kind of a melding, a fusion of Catholicism and ancient African religions that came over with the slaves into Cuba. So it's a kind of a very dark, crazy place. But bigger than that, when I went to visit Cuba, I was just shocked to know the poverty that they're living in. I'm living in Guatemala, which is a developing country, and it's definitely a poor country. But Cuba is an entirely new level. So, for example, in the United States, the minimum wage is, between 12 and maybe $15 per hour, depending on where you live. If you're, you know, but that's going to be average. It might be a little bit more on the West Coast. In Cuba, the minimum wage is 15 to $17 per month. And it that doesn't mean that everything's cheap there. As a matter of fact, it's not. It's just, how do you even survive with that? And so the country basically right now, in my opinion, based on everything that I've seen, over the last half dozen times that I've been there, the country is really living on what's called a black market, a version of a black market, which is basically this kind of trade market within the people. So what happens is everybody that works for the state, so that means teachers make, 15 to $17 an hour. Doctors make 15 to $17 an hour. Gas station attendants, the government owns everything. Hotels, factories, they own everything, and that's what they pay the people. Well, that's clearly not enough to eat. So people get money from family that escaped the island, that now live in generally the United States, from, different people who are supporting them from outside of Cuba are sending money in. That's one of the ways that we support the Cuban people, is we take money in to pastors to help them so that they can focus on sharing the gospel. And I think, Jan, I mean, my faith completely just took another level. It just went in a different place. When you go to Cuba and you see people that are living in that kind of poverty and desperation, and then you meet these pastors who have a love for the Lord that is eternal. They are not living in any way for a worldly, compensation in any way, shape, or form. They're literally surviving day to day, but they're sharing the Lord and they're sharing the gospel because they want to see more people in heaven. And they're sharing it in a way that I've just never seen before. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's completely changed me. And it's made me more desperate to share the gospel. It's made me more desperate to draw close to God. And so I guess that's the story I would leave you with.
Wow. All because you were watching football.
That's where it started. Yeah. Obedience. I was not the guy that God should have chosen. I really had nothing to offer,
That's what he does,
except,
though. Look, he
yeah,
can kill all these people all the way through.
yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing your morning with us. Wow. It is just so good.
I'm humbled. I really appreciate your having me on. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I want to be like George when I grow up. So wrapped up in Jesus that my life is consumed by his grace and direction and fulfillment. So here's the question I want you to consider as we end. If God asked you what you love most, what would your honest answer be? And imagine if we all reflected on that and wrote down our answers and really asked God how he wants to change our lives. You can find links to George's Bible study and website in the show notes. Check them out. And I'll leave you with these scriptures, John 21:15 through 17. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said. "You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time, he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And Jesus said, "Feed my sheep." Jeremiah 29:13. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I want to credit Northwestern for the song Hometown used in this episode. Music is from Upbeat. Blessings, my friend. I look forward to joining you next week when we hear from Christina Custodio. Christina Custodio is a speaker, author, teacher, photographer, and encourager who has a gift of seeing God's hand in every detail of life. Her journey took a profound turn in 2015 when her son nearly died, leading her into ministry and inspiring her book, When God Changed His Mind. As you go through your week, remember to spend time reflecting on that question, and then let me know where God takes you. Really, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a friend or relative that would find value in this episode? Please share it. And you can let them know that if they'd prefer to watch, I always put these episodes on YouTube. So check that out in the show notes. And if you watch on YouTube, consider subscribing, because just as when you subscribe to this podcast and get notification when new episodes are out, the same will happen if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just Talking About Jesus. And then you won't miss an episode. Speaking of subscribing, are you getting my newsletters? These not only tell the guest stories, but also include pictures and links to the website and YouTube. I also add a little about my life, and who doesn't want to know that?